GM, GA, GE, wherever you may be. Today on Lucky Trader Lounge, we're talking about the week in NFTs and what we can expect over through the weekend. Hey, welcome, Tyler. So today, let me bring this up. We were going to go over a little of just the general market right now, where things are at, what type of stuff has been popular this week. So first, let's start with this Dune Analytics. What's your takeaway here?
Yeah, so if we take a look at the daily candles in this chart on the right, I mean, it's pretty clear that we are entering a bull cycle here, or we are definitely on an uptrend. The liquidity is entering the market. So like when we were doing the show, basically the whole month of March, right? Like liquidity was low. We were coming in at like anywhere from $60 to $70 million a day. Kind of well below that $100 million a day threshold. Well, in the past week, we've just smashed right through that. So for the past 7 days, I want to say the daily average has been between 120, 130 million per day, punctuated by just the blow off day we had on Sunday, April 3rd, where we came in at 170 million, which was the biggest OpenSea day revenue we've had since early February. Actually, Super Bowl weekend. I think when everyone thought
there was the day after dirt. Was it still dirt that day?
It might have.
That might have been when they changed it.
And I was thinking through when I was looking back at this chart today, like what was the driver for the huge spike on Sunday? I don't know that there was any single driver, which was also my takeaway is super bullish. And I think we've entered the phase of the market where money that was on the sidelines is back in play. And we're starting to see that rotation of funds. It starts at the top. It starts with the blue chips, right? Bored Apes and ApeCoin set this all off. And they're the reason that we got this nice set of daily candles around March 20th when we first passed 100 million. And then the money started to trickle down from there. So Azuki's was number 2. Their lead up to their huge party and then the beans drop has been a big driver. And then we've started to see it rotate around. And when we take a look at the Lucky Trader board in a bit, we'll be able to see some of the other projects that have benefited.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting to look at this chart because if you're looking at just, say, the past week of it, you'd think, yesterday was like a down day. But if you zoom out a little, that somewhat down day is still higher than a lot of the days in March. So, like you said, it does seem like there's a little more liquidity in the market right now. I think there's less of these random, just like rug pull quick projects popping up as maybe they used to be. So it seems like a lot of those have cleaned out.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's been a big beneficiary. We're not seeing a whole lot of money being taken out of the ecosystem. I think another takeaway from this week is we had these strong volumes, and it wasn't a huge week. Like there wasn't really any announcements. There weren't that many new mints, really. We had some nice reveals, but for us to come in at 128 million a day on a slow week, I think is a really positive sign.
Yeah. So then I guess let's get a little into which of these projects have been doing well this week. As we mentioned on the Monday show, it seemed like people were trailing this sort of anime meta. And I think on this chart, you can see a lot of that has been holding a little better than some of these other projects.
Yeah. So, I mean, just starting right at the top 3 on the board are Azuki, CloneX, and Beans Official. So, we've covered Azuki and Beans, but they've combined for 33,000 ETH traded in the past 7 days. I mean, that's just a huge, huge amount. They've been a big driver for this.
Basically, since Beans drop started a week ago.
Yeah, so Beans came out just a little over a week ago. I want to say it was Wednesday night, right?
Yeah.
So it's been about a week and 12 hours. but yeah, a majority of the trading it's really just been a week. So in their first week, a pre-revealed image has traded 12,000 ETH. It holds a 5.4 ETH floor. I want to say, yeah, there's only 230 of these listed out of 20,000, right? Which is just an absurdly low number. So there's high hopes for this one.
And they still don't have that many like random, or they still don't have that much info. It's still kind of been random cryptic type of messages about it.
Yeah, no new information since we talked on Monday. It's all still kind of hype and speculation, which I think is also a risk to this, right? If the reveal is not well received, I wouldn't be surprised if the floor cuts in half. But the flip side is if it is well received, I wouldn't be surprised if it runs to 10 and we have a blow off weekend if it reveals this weekend, which is my sneaky theory.
Yeah, I think one thing that we talked about on Monday, which it's kind of funny because we're going to be talking about it again, is there weren't really things minting this week that were super hyped, but the hype stuff are things that haven't revealed yet. So it's like the monolith, the beans, imposters. I think there was another one. Well, Akuma revealed, right? That was the
Akuma
other
did
big reveal.
Yeah.
So I don't know if Evereye, I think they were already revealed on Monday, but they've pumped since, sort of off of this Azuki on Twitter. It seems like Azuki holders are backing them and talking about them, and that seems to have pumped it a little bit. What's your take on the Evereye?
Yeah, I mean, you nailed. So it's clear that when we think about like how the money is flowing, and it's clear like the Azuki run is paused, right? The daily liquidity numbers are down significantly from the huge run. That money's going elsewhere. And three of the biggest winners were in that anime sector. It was Akuma, Kiwami, and Evereye. And of those three, I think the early winner is Evereye. And we can take a look at their page. Here, I'll pull up their OpenSea page. So it's sitting around a 1 ETH floor. I want to say it got pumped all the way to 1.2 last night. It was a 0.3 ETH mint. So, 3 to 4x from the mint price.
Oh, I didn't realize the mint price was that high. I thought it was 0.1.
Yeah, I wasn't sure either. But then one of the pages I checked, it showed 0.3. I didn't mint this one.
But I think they might have done it as like a Dutch auction, so that's probably why. Yeah.
Okay, that could be it. But I mean, just scrolling through it, taking a look at the art, I mean, it's like anime mechaverse to me. So I was surprised.
A lot of them kind of look alike too. Like those two on the left there. Actually, yeah, the top two on the left and the row below. Like they look like the one that's next to it.
So I think my take on what's happening here is the Azuki community and ecosystem is now kind of getting strong enough to move markets and move the markets that they choose to play in. And, all the talk behind Evereye is it seems to be like the Azuki community, right? Who's really driving this one. And, I think that's part of the reason why we're surprised, but maybe this is just part of our new normal. And when we think back, the Bored Ape Yacht Club community absolutely single-handedly drove projects last year, right? And I don't know that not that many are coming to mind, but there was definitely a point where any new product with the word ape in the title did well for a pretty extended period of time. So I think we might be getting into that might be the theme of this next cycle that we're entering here is if the Azuki community decides if they want to latch on to something and drive it, it might be a good bet, at least early on.
Yeah, and sort of the question is like how high can it really run? It's already up to that 1 ETH, so it's getting to that level where I don't know, maybe they do need something else involved to really push it over the hump. But I do know there are a bunch of people that were in on this early on who have held strong with it. So this was definitely one that somewhat surprising because it was a little I don't know how you'd word it, like a delayed pump to it, where it was sitting around that 0.3. I think it got down under 0.2 for a little bit even. And then, last couple of days, it really ran off of that sort of narrative of being connected to Azuki. Yeah, so
Yeah, it was down.
around the second there is when
Yeah,
it started rising back a little bit.
yeah. Still, average price on April 2nd was 0.28, so
Yeah.
below mint, and then it's just been a rocket since then. I think what surprised me, and maybe both of us, I think we were a little more bullish on Akuma and where it could go. But
Yeah.
this seems to have been a bearish reveal.
Yeah, another one where, I mean, if you look at that top row, there's a lot that kind of look exactly the same. And I don't know if that comes with just the territory of having this many items. The one thing that I was a little more bullish on with Akuma was it's that 5555
Mhm.
supply amount. And so this is still holding at a 1 ETH floor. Do you remember how far it got? It was like 1.5 or so
Yeah, up to
pre-reveal.
0.5 for sure. I saw. I don't know if it got much higher than that.
Mhm.
Um, but it got up there. So it's down about 30% post reveal, which is a kind of the standard outcome, right? That we see in a lot of these. But typically, it's also
Mhm.
a bad outcome, a bad sign for things to come. And I don't know, for whatever reason, I get kind of on one vibes off of these,
Yeah,
and
it's a little similar art style too,
of course it's
the
early
coloring.
on. The first few weeks of a project are always the most volatile. It's hard to judge it. We got to let the team execute and all that. But
Yeah.
absent some big announcements and some big execution, I'd say this one's probably starting to trend down.
Yeah, and to me, the art style on this one doesn't feel anime like. It does seem very similar to the Oni Force that they had, uh, especially with like the coloring and just the stylistic of the drawing itself. Um, there have been a couple other ones that feel more anime like to me, like the Shonen. That one felt a little more anime style to me. This one is more similar to like Gorillas, their artwork, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, this one is still over 1 ETH floor. People are still somewhat talking about it, but it's kind of hard to run off the heels of one of these other big projects like a Nizuki if you look too similar or are too similar of a style anyway. So maybe that's where the Evereye have a little different of a style to them, more like the Transformers look in that way. And then the Kiwami, what's your thought on that one comparatively? This
So
feels a little more anime to me as
it
well.
it does. It seems to be the most unique in some ways of the three. It seems to have maybe its own cohort of followers, so to speak. Like it doesn't feel like it was Azuki's driving the Kiwami buying. At least from what I saw on Twitter, it seemed to have kind of its own buyer group. Um,
Mhm.
but with that being said, I, I will. My view is we're going to see the same outcome for anime season 2 as we saw for anime season 1 in
Yeah.
in February, where these projects catch a few weeks of attention and then they kind of get into slow decline. So I'm not really bullish on any of these three.
And this Kiwami one, like I don't know what it is. The hands just look weird to me. I
Oh
don't know
yeah,
if
the
it's
hands. I forgot
maybe
that you hate
because
the
they're
hands.
like maybe maybe because they're not in everyone, so it looks weird when they pop up. But I don't know why. The hands to me just look kind of weird. I haven't, I mean, full disclosure, I'm not in any of these three. I had some of I think I had two Akuma pre-reveal that I sold when they were originally going up last weekend. Didn't sell them nearly high enough as far as where they eventually got to. But yeah, it's what is interesting is all three of them do look a little different. They're not all the same. This Kiwami one is the biggest supply and it's zero
Mhm.
point 0.7 floor. So I don't know if that's a more bullish sign or not. But Akuma had so much volume when those were pre-reveal that I don't know. It's hard to like hold up when you're saving on reveal that long. Like we might come to it with the imposters as well, but it's like you're holding that long and people just have their hopes up so high. I mean, the imposters pre-reveal right now are around 2 ETH floor. And then, what happens if they come out and people don't like what they look? So that's somewhat an issue with these longer reveals in between. But on the other side of that, if you want to talk about the Vayner Sports passes, opposite. These were instant reveal and sort of instantly came with a lot of FUD around it because of gas issues. These were supposed to be a 0.155 ETH mint. Right now, they're at 0.42 floor. You'd think, oh, that's great. But a lot of people, there might not have been anyone that got in for less than half an ETH with gas. So they use inefficient gas contract. They're not using the 721A, which kind of has become the norm and just accepted at this point. So this was super hyped. It was from AJ Vaynerchuk. And yeah, what was your take on the Vayner Sports Pass?
Yeah, so I was excited for this one. It had been hyped. They've been trying to hype it as the proof collective for sports. And, I like that narrative. That's a narrative I could rally behind. And 0.15 entry price for anything in the Gary V family is attractive. Just quick side note, shout out to book games. 125,000 supplies held a 0.54. I think it dipped a little bit.
Even after the claim part, yeah.
Which is just absurd. So that's the level of demand that these guys can generate. So when they release products, I'm going to pay attention. And at 0.15, I'm like absolutely going to go after this. And then started the mint went live. I missed the first minute or so because I was on a wrong Etherscan contract, which is another part of the problem. They didn't have a verified contract link.
They switched it last minute, right? Or potentially. Or
yeah, that might have been verified. It. Oh yeah. I think that is what happened. But then essentially what happened was the effective mint price was somewhere between 0.6 to 0.8 ETH, most likely, kind of pending how early you got in. And so right out of the gate, I think the floor was above that effective price for a bit. And then kind of the news started to spread that this mint burned 3x more dollars or ETH
gas,
in gas than they brought in revenue through the primary sale, which is just a terrible outcome, right? And kind of to your point, it's the 721A or similar has become such a standard. It raises the question of how thoughtful the team was in preparing the launch. And I think a lot of people exited on that. And of course, with the 15,000 supply, there were a lot of folks coming in, of course, looking to instant flip. And the floor went down. So it just started the undercutting and it hasn't really fully rebounded yet, though it seems like we may have found a bottom here around the 0.4 range.
Yeah, I think it's gotten into the threes a couple times, but it does seem like people are pretty comfortable with 0.4 paying for this. It's still somewhat unclear what the utility of it is. It's going to have to do with sports in some way. There's a lot of different sports partnerships that have been teased with this. It was just kind of weird day of, there's both him and Gary were the day before basically saying you're going to want to be a part of this, you're going to regret it kind of thing. And then after people are complaining about paying 0.8 on a 0.15 mint, then all of a sudden they kind of took a step back. And it was a little weird. But, AJ, he went on Twitter Spaces that night. Like, he has been updating people about giving money back. They're doing refunds up at this 192 ETH total of refunds on failed transactions. And yeah, like you said, like, they were hyping up this mint as if it was something that was going to be sneaky. Wasn't sneaky at all because they're giving 24 days notice and to a Discord that has like 150,000 people, I think, or something like that. So I don't know how they really expected this to be any sort of stealthy. They created the contract, and people watch that type of stuff these days. And I mean, I knew what the contract was 4 hours before. And then one thing that was kind of somewhat, I guess, sneaky in a way on what they did with the contract, which I don't know if you could do that with 721As. Haven't heard that being the reason why they didn't use it, but there was like a purchase versus mint function. So you actually had to use the purchase function, not the mint. So people that were planning to bought it, like went, like weren't able to in that sense. But then they made it, I believe it was website only, was part of that as well. As you mentioned, not verifying it. So they had ways around it getting botted, but then it ended up being sort of an opposite effect because, I mean, people would almost rather it get botted than them paying 0.8 for it, because if it gets botted, they could have been entering here at 0.4 instead or something like that.
Yeah, that's an interesting take, and it'll also be applicable to our Moonbirds discussion later on. But this was a case where everyone was mad. Like the botters were mad because they couldn't get in. The public was mad because they minted and overpaid for it. Although I will say, people are mad because the floor is down. If the floor was 1 ETH or 1.5, no one would be complaining about the gas war. In my opinion. Because this is not the first time we've seen outrageous gas. Back in the heyday of art blocks curated, this was pretty. This was a pretty frequent outcome, was to pay this much in gas, and no one cared because they were still profitable mints.
And I think before it was kind of like expected and accepted that we're on ETH. That was sort of it before. But now that this 721A has come out and has allowed for a reduction in this gas stuff, it hasn't been a crazy issue for people. That's somewhat saves Ethereum minting in general. The fact that you're able to use that, and that's what Azuki has really popularized as being one of the first leaders as far as using that type of contract. And so it's just kind of weird. It somewhat like shows that they might be more separated from the tech side than maybe we thought. But yeah, this will be a good one to watch because I don't know. In my opinion, I think they have enough on the line as far as just reputation wise, and they have the connections to make that they could easily create enough utility long term on these where 0.4 is a good entry still. We're not sure what type of utility is going to be attached to this. If the sports that are on your card matter, it seems like the market doesn't believe that matters too much. I think the highest sales have been non-sport, the holograms and diamonds. The ones that are non-sport have gone for decent amount. There's a few sales that have been over 10 ETH. So it seems like people are still buying. I mean, one thing we talk about a lot is just betting on people. And this one is more of a bet on people. I think if this was someone of lower sort of fame, I guess you could call it, this could easily just be under 0.2 right now. So I think that's sort of what's holding it up, is people still want to believe in AJ and the potential utility behind these.
Yeah, absolutely agree. You're spot on there. And also to his credit, I think they handled the response pretty well. So, AJ was in the comments of, a lot of the big Twitter accounts kind of explaining, apologizing. They've been pretty forthright, saying, hey, look, we made some mistakes. We could have done this better, but we want to make it right. And, they're already starting to work on the refunds. So I hope that this is kind of like a chip on the shoulder type thing that makes them want to work harder to make this right to people. But again, I meant it too. I'm holding them. I definitely think this has some upside potential. And what you said early on, we still don't know exactly what the utility of these passes will be and what the different tiers will be. So there's still a lot of open questions, but it's a good team to bet on for sure.
Yeah. Cool. So let's get into, you want to talk about the Moonbirds one now? We talked about this a little bit. They made an announcement. Basically, they're pivoting instead of doing this Dutch auction. And I think some of this came out of that Vayner Pass, that they don't want the potential of a gas war or bots. So they're going down the raffle path. So what's sort of your take on what Kevin Rose and the Moonbirds are doing now?
I've been through the whole cycle of emotions on this one. So first off, I was disappointed, just because selfishly I was going to try to mint as many of these as possible, and now that option is essentially removed. But I watched his full 9-minute video that he released tied to this announcement on Twitter this morning. And man, it's hard to be mad at or fade Kevin Rose. I mean, it was just such a thoughtful video. All of the logic that went into this decision, and he, was forthright with how difficult of a decision it was, and how there's no outcome that's going to make everyone happy. So the scenario that a lot of people have put forth on Twitter is, we'll just make it a higher start Dutch auction, let the market decide what they want to pay. But he's been steady with the fact that they don't want to charge more than 2.5. That's the amount of funding that they feel like they need for this product. They don't want to take more than that from folks. So if you remove that as an option, then there's really not that many additional scenarios that make more sense. So the raffle seems like the best option. They've talked about different tactics that they're going to make to try to keep bots out of the raffle. And and he said transparently, hey, bots are going to get into this. We saw the Murakami Flowers had 4.5 million entrants into their raffle. So I'm really hoping it's not like that. So I guess logistically, to get into the Moonbirds raffle, you have to have a Twitter handle, Discord name, and you have to have 2.5 ETH in your wallet. That's one option that I wish they actually would have done, was require a 2.5 ETH lockup, so that you actually had to kind of buy a raffle ticket with a refund option for those who don't make it. What I don't know the answer of is if,
because you can just switch it to another wallet, right?
Can I send the 2.5 ETH to another wallet?
Yeah,
that's what I don't know. But who knows? They might manually curate the list though.
Yeah,
and look for folks who do that.
It's hard. I don't really know the perfect way to do it either without that sort of lockup, like a hold on your account, which that would also come back with a lot of, I don't know what the backlash of that would be, because then you really kind of have to trust it. I know that they're doing this through pre-mint, and maybe pre-mint can long-term create some sort of escrow in order to do that. I don't think they're there right now, but what if you had to also hold like the pre-mint NFT or one of these NFTs that I guess proof is already really expensive. But it's tough because you could just create another Discord account, another Twitter account, send money over there and reconnect. So it's hard. I know from doing some giveaways in the past, there are ways to do IP addresses, checker. There's some slow ways, but I mean, people can create 10 Gmail accounts, enter this 10 times, 10 Discords. There's ways that people still have around it. And that's the part with raffles that I'm not as excited about. Maybe if they're doing this through Premint has a way around some of it. I know that Mulligan from Premint came out and said they haven't seen more than 70,000 accounts in one of their raffles. But I mean, the closest we've probably had to this is maybe Invisible Friends. And that one wasn't a raffle like this.
Right.
Mechaverse had a raffle like this, you only need 0.2 and people were able to work around it. Maybe the 2.5 does hold some people back as far as doing it.
Yeah, I think it absolutely will. You just said 70,000. I mean, if I had to think what the over under for this would be, I'd probably set it around there, maybe 100,000. I think really the answer is, can a bot farm with 100, shuffle 2.5 ETH around or not? That's going to be a big factor.
Yeah, I mean, I know people who on Mechaverse had 20 entries.
Right.
Like there's ways that people can do this. Say, like with Axie, you have like the scholarships. You might have 20 people that you have on scholarship. You'd be like, hey, I'll send you the 2.5. Enter this for me. If I win it, you get 0.5 back. Like the thing with all these is there's going to be people that work around and play the game of it. That's just the nature of the beast, I think, at this point. That's why I still side with the gas war in a weird way. Unless there's a way to like control it to like one per wallet and things like that. So I don't know. It's tough for me. It's just so easy to make a wallet and an address in a Discord. Maybe you have to like hold within their Discord itself. They give roles and there's some other collaboration. I'm not sure. There's probably no perfect way to do it, really.
Yeah, there really isn't, other than I think the perfect launch style, and I wish every NFT went to this for the most part, is 100 ETH Dutch auction, gradual decline to 0.1, and a true fair Dutch auction where everyone gets refunded down to what the bottom net price was.
Yeah.
That is what a true Dutch auction is. To me, that's the fairest way to do it.
Yeah. They could even start this at 10 and do it that way.
But also part of what Kevin wants to do, and he said it in the video, like he doesn't want whales to control the mint process either. And he clearly has gotten input that DAOs were teaming up, people were pooling funds, that this was going to be dominated by essentially the rich, and he wants folks who have lower bankrolls to get a shot at this. And he wants a wide distribution, right? There's 10,000 Moonbirds. He doesn't want 3,000 owners. He wants 6,000 or 9,000, right? I'll be really curious how those ownership numbers play out, because they're going to come out of the gate at 10,000 in this. Yeah. Well, no, because not exactly, because there's 8,000 available for the raffle. The proof holders each get 2.
Yeah.
So it's going to come out above 8,000 at least. I'll be curious where that consolidates.
Yeah, so we have in here, wouldn't that hit a gas war though at the sellout? So yes, it could. However, I think if people know in advance that it's going to be 2.5 ETH starting price, they almost can gather the expectation that it'll go out at 2.5. If it starts at 10, but maybe starts moving at like 6, it might not be as crazy of a gas war, because people might not be funding their account 10 to fire it 4 times. Mm-hmm. Instead, they can only fire once. So that's sort of my take, is it's more surprise, like, oh, it's running now. That's what happened with like Art Blocks last year, as you alluded to before, is when Art Blocks was doing these Dutch auctions, it would be that like hold the line idea. But once that starts going, then people have to decide, ooh, okay, it's at 4 ETH. Do I want this at 4 ETH? It creates a little more of a decision than more planned when it's an exact number. I guess that's my take. It's not like a perfect system either way, but I think it has the idea that it could go higher, or people are holding the line and it goes lower.
Yeah, I mean, the proof Dutch auction started at 5, and like 30% went on the gun, and then everyone decided to hold the line, and it was actually flooded hard that day on Twitter. I missed this one. I was actually out that day. It ended up going at the bottom price of 1 ETH, and it's now like I think around 80, 85 it might be today.
Yeah,
And
it
that's
got
been
over 90, I think,
oh
earlier.
gosh.
Right after this announcement, it pumped from like 70 to 90.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a rocket ship, and that's absolutely driving expectations for Moonbirds. I don't know if we want to get into full Moonbirds analysis or save that for next week,
Yeah.
but it's going to have a huge impact on the market for the next 10 days, right? I think a lot
Yeah.
of traders have very short-term mindsets right now. They're trying to flip projects into ETH for Moonbirds. And when enough people have that same mindset and there aren't enough people to buy their bags, that's when you get into undercutting. So I think it's a really risky time to be entering a lot of these lower end and lower mid-tier projects
Yeah.
for the next week and a half because of this event.
Yeah. We'll do more of like a deep dive next week on the project itself. So as mentioned, you have until the 10th in order to submit to this raffle. That also allows time for people to come up with 2.5 ETH or create more accounts. So I didn't really love that it was that long of a time frame on it. But then I think the only other thing that people are kind of looking at right now as another thing to spend ETH on in short term is probably the drifter shoots. That's probably the big one. And then I don't know if you saw, but if people had Aku, I'm not sure how that's pronounced, from Micah Johnson. Um, he was doing an airdrop for the holders as well, and he has an avatar project coming out a little bit. Might be some short-term liquidity, but going into the weekend, like that's the thing is like a lot of these projects, people don't want to spend in that 2 to 5 ETH range on little bets. We saw a little some pullback on the cyber brokers down back under 5 ETH. Pudgy Penguins, they pulled back to that 2.5 range. So I think people are thinking right now in that 2.5 ETH for the Moonbirds. Maybe they're not buying things in that range right now, and there's going to be short liquidity there. The only other one is this like imposters we talked about a little the other day, but they're supposed to reveal tomorrow. That could be one that drives some short term liquidity through the weekend. And then Arcade Land was the other one. I don't know if you looked at that one. They've been sort of slowly rising through the week and a half. They have a lot of different partnerships. They're kind of moving similar to when like World Wide Web grew after they were pairing with a bunch of different projects. So were there other ones in this short term in that mid range? I guess you could call it. I don't know if we want to cut. What would we call that? Like tier 3, I guess. That like 2 to 5 range.
Yeah, that's
Um,
probably 2 or 3.
so that's
Yeah,
what we're fighting with right now as far as the liquidity. I don't know if you wanted to go further into Adidas with their announcement.
yeah. Let's talk Adidas. So Adidas was sitting around. So it had been like 1 ETH for forever, and then it got to like mid ones, 1.5, 1.7. And they came out with an announcement for Osworld this week, and as any announcement does for a big name set,
Yeah.
it drove the market into a tizzy. The floor went all the way up to 2.5. I saw it. I don't know if it got much higher than 2.5, but they're essentially launching a PFP collection, and I don't know if this was explicitly outlined, but I think the expectation is that the Adidas NFT owners will receive one. I will say I was thrown off by the Discord announcement at first. So they talk about this avatar that you'll be able to create on the Osworld website that will be kind of a mirror of your personality, and you can create gifts with it. You'll be able to download it, to your machine, similar to kind of a bit of an Anata type concept, but it won't
Mm-hmm.
be an NFT, and that threw me off. I think it threw a lot of people off who thought that the PFP that they were getting from Adidas was not going to be an NFT and it was going to be this other type of asset. And the floor dipped because of that. And it went down to I think it went back to 1.7. It's sitting back up around 2 ETH today
Mm-hmm.
when I checked, which is a pretty steady point. But I don't know. There's a lot of people who were kind of quietly saying this is the most overlooked project out there right now, and
The
this is
Oz
kind of this
or Adidas?
the Adidas / Osworld. If you kind of group them
Mhm.
together for right now, that this is the most
Yeah.
slept on, potential upside play that there is right now. I tend to agree. This is a huge brand behind it. It's got some big projects tied into it, right? With Pixel Vault and G Money's tied in. I think Bored Apes I feel like are also in a lot of ways that community is tied into this. So I definitely
Yeah.
see some opportunity if,
Because
if
Pixel Vault
Oswald.
got original whitelist access to mint that these Adidas, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So yeah, big connections. It's a pretty major brand as well, and they're NFT basically. So something to be watching with the Adidas side of it, and like you mentioned, they could easily just be one or two announcements away from pumping again and having a big spike. It seems like people are interesting to see what type of utility this Adidas NFT can provide, because as of now, it's just the artwork, right?
Right. But I think there's going to
And
be
the
some
clothing,
expectations.
the
Yeah.
jumpsuit. I want to have one of those jumpsuits, but it's not until like Q4, I think, is on that roadmap. So people don't want to just like sit around waiting for something and holding, $5,000 to $6,000 worth in an asset and not knowing what to do with it when there's other opportunities, like say a Moonbirds to be buying into. So yeah,
Yeah, that's where I was going to go with this. It's so tricky to time a launch in April right now
yeah,
if you're a new project. We've got Moonbirds next weekend, massive liquidity event, and then Yuga Land hanging over everyone's heads. We don't know when it's going to drop. It's probably going to drop 12 to 24 hours advance notice. My gut is Yuga Land's coming in the month, like around April 30th or so is my internal target for that. Maybe that's just wishful thinking. Um, but it's kind of a minefield of when to try to drop a new project in
yeah,
these next 3 or 4 weeks. So I'll be curious how soon coming soon actually is here
yeah,
for Osworld. Um,
yeah. I'd expect. I mean, it's tough in NFT world, but I'd expect by the end of April probably to have like but more clarity. Hopefully, it's by mid-April, like by the 15th or so. The other narrative that's sort of been going around as well is another week or two here and tax season ending soon. So that's something that I think has been on people's minds. It's sure been on my mind as well, as far as making sure that you have enough to pay the tax man before going with your next adventures in NFTs. So that's something I think we'll be watching this Osworld in the Adidas collab. Adidas has seemed to have a lot of connections, so probably more coming that is good to watch out for that project, I'd say. And then the monolith is one that you want to talk about with RTF artifact. So your take is this is going to finally come out as to what it is this weekend, right?
Yeah, so I've read some great threads. I've been going down the rabbit hole on Monolith. It's one of my favorite plays out there right now from a trading perspective. I'm forgetting who authored this thread, but he did this deep dive into the ties to 2001: A Space Odyssey, the movie, and there's a monolith in that movie, and he tied all of the components to dimensions of the box in the NFT picture back to the movie. He, through his analysis, he thinks April 9th is going to be the drop day.
Because that was
Additionally,
in the movie,
I forget the
the
exact
same date.
detail,
Oh,
but he tied out 4-9 in some way, and I'll have to go back through the thread. Um, and then separately, one of the artifact founders also said this was going to come out before his birthday, and his birthday is in mid-April. And then for me, just kind of putting 2 and 2 together, like, would you want to launch it the same day as Moonbird? Like, I don't think so. So we're starting to run out of runway. And if I was launching a huge or revealing a huge project like this, I would likely aim for this weekend. So I'm pegging Saturday for the monolith reveal. And they've been doing the final quests over in the Discord to get through everything. I actually don't know if they've completed the final quest or not, but I know it was at least getting close.
Yeah.
But the predictions are that this is somehow tied back to the clones, either creating new clones, creating digital wearables for the clones. This will be some type of generator device. So this is not going to be a PFP. So for anyone who thinks that, I would throw that idea away. But I think there will absolutely be ongoing utility tied to it. It's Nike's first NFT. So we've got the Nike marketing machine, potentially behind this. And everything Artifacts has done has been a slam dunk. I mean, they're one of the leading teams in the space for sure. So I think this reveal will be a significant event, at a 7 ETH price point in this market that's pretty approachable, relatively. And we saw how fast Azuki went from 10 to 35. I mean, this is 20,000 supply. I won't be surprised if this thing rips to 15 on a positive announcement.
And I think it somewhat, I don't want to say depends, but part of it is how connected to CloneX itself will this be. I think we see this with companions a lot where they're somewhat limited to their upside based on the size of the actual collection. But this is, half the supply of CloneX. So I think that's somewhat benefiting them in that way. But, it's still under the Artifact wing. And yeah, I think this will be an interesting one. As you mentioned, like, we'd like to think that projects are competent in the idea of knowing what's going on in the market right now. And, Moonbirds is coming, the Yuga Land is coming, and pretty much can expect those things aren't happening this weekend. One thing that might be happening this weekend that they would compete is Azuki reveal on the beans. And of course there's the imposters one too, but this would be higher than that, I think. So that's the part that we'd like to think that they think that way. I don't know if the Gutter Cat gang did the same. Like they didn't expect Azuki to drop on the same day as them either. But yeah, that's the thing, is liquidity in this high of 7 floor threshold is key. So you want to make sure that there's enough liquidity in the market for that reveal, because people are probably gonna, if there's rarity that you can hit on these, then people are going to want to go for something like this that has that high upside.
Yeah, I think they alluded to that there will be some kind of rarity. They're not going to be 20,000 copies, so there's going to be some differentiation in the set. They've also alluded to some benefits to owning specific CloneX. I think the drip ones specifically, or maybe they've also got some hints at different DNA out there. So there's certainly going to be more of the story. No one knows. It's all just speculation. But yeah, I mean, my hot take is we're going to get 2 reveals this weekend. They're going to both be Saturday, Monolith and Beans, and we're going to have a blow-off top week. Maybe not blow-off top. We're going to have a huge liquidity weekend in NFTs. So it's that's my bullish take this week.
Yeah, I think it'll be definitely something we'll keep our eye on. And yeah, if the liquidity is hot and people are in on these things, then that'll be beneficial to Moonbirds as well the week later. So is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you're thinking about this week? I know we covered a lot. I think we covered everything that we were planning to.
A couple things. So I think we got to talk a little bit about the Franks, right?
Yeah, Franks. Frank.
The new meme that took over last night Um, so I've been on the sidelines for this one, but in one of the chats, it come across my desk that there's this Frank project, and if you post anything in the Discord
Yeah.
besides Frank, it gets deleted. So I had a good chuckle at that. Like, what is going on with this? And then I saw these, and it makes a little bit more sense when you see the animated image of just the Frank, essentially said at the speed of the legs of the character Frank in these. But it's got a few influencers are tweeting about it. I don't think this is a great investment play, but it is a fun meme right now. Memes can come and go pretty quick.
Yeah, obviously not financial advice, but it's a lot more risky at this price point. It is the type of thing that there's only 2,000 of them. So like, would it surprise me if come Monday these things were 5 ETH? Probably not. Am I going to bet on it? Probably not. But I got in on these a couple days ago because I thought they were funny. They rose a little too fast for me to be able to like delist and figure out what was going on, how far they could go. Because one thing that we saw was with a supply this low, there's not that many listings, and now in the world of gem sweeps, it can go pretty quickly. It went from about like 0.1 0.15 up to 0.4 in like 25 minutes. I think I had mentioned at one point in the Discord, I said it's somewhat risky at 0.5 because it had already ran from 0.15 like a couple hours earlier. And someone 20 minutes later responded to that and said, well, it's 0.95 now. So it is one of those things where it kind of reminded me of that first night of Toads, where if enough people are talking about them on Twitter, then people want to know what it's about. They hop in, they're like, oh, this thing's wild, it's different. The downside of it is then we got like 50 projects coming out with something similar. There was like a moo for cows. There's like derp. I saw a bunch of like random ones out there. There was some FUD around this at one point. And I don't know. It's the type of thing where it's tough for these types of projects to hold super long term. A lot of people are very confused because like you go into Discord and it's just word Frank over and over. You don't know if they're going to be planning on doing anything or anything like that. But it is fun, GIF wise, to be able to use their GIFs in other Discords. The one with like the cat face is pretty funny on here. But yeah, this was one that sort of took over last night.
Yeah, this is definitely one where if you try to explain NFTs to a normal friend, this is not the project to use as your example.
It's like the 4chan type of pump.
It's impossible to explain. I think the only other one, I want to come back to Pudgy Penguins just briefly for a minute here. So we saw these start to run. I don't know if it was a week ago or a little bit longer. And then a few days after the initial pump, formally was announced that they had been acquired for 750 ETH. So they have a new owner now. And of course, an announcement of that size moved the market, rightfully or wrongfully. But we saw this thing go all the way to 3.8 ETH floor at one point, which was near its all-time high. I was knee-deep trading Pudgy Penguins last year. It crossed 4 briefly at one point. It didn't hold 4 for very long. Again, near its all-time high. The lesson here is don't sell anything. Like, there can always be an exit pump. I mean, we thought the Pudgy Penguins were totally dead back when they were sub 1. The team had been fudded so hard. No one really liked them. They weren't delivering on the promises. They had fishing poles hatched from eggs.
Yeah.
And it was about as bad as it could get. And then now we announce a new owner and the floor is, even after the huge pump, it's still back at 2.5 ETH. So clearly the IP is important. People love the pudgy penguins. That's
the image
a fact.
itself. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And I think, with the new owner, it was initially like, oh, what are they going to do? And now I think the pullback was more of a, well, we don't know if this Luka Nets is going to do anything to help the project long term. So maybe that's where this pullback kind of came from, is just because it's a new person doesn't mean it needs to go up 4x overnight.
yeah, I mean, if you're going to buy on a new owner, I would at least want to understand what the new owner's plans are. And I see there's a few questions in the comments. I actually don't know much about Luka Nets or his background. So I need to do a little research there myself. But personally, I'd want to hear a little bit more about plans for the Penguins, because kind of on the cycle of a project, they're pretty far along. They've already done 2 airdrops with the presents and or the presents, were those the eggs? And then we had little pudgies. So we've had essentially the companion as well as an airdrop. So I think that's 2 big levers to pull already in a PFP ecosystem.
Yeah.
So this is definitely not starting from scratch. I don't think we're going to see a Pingu coin come out anytime soon, which is another kind of popular PFP play, right?
Yeah.
For those who can pull it off. So I'd be thinking hard about kind of, if you're looking for an airdrop as utility, what do you think that actually could be? Of course, they could potentially execute on that game that the previous founders had laid out, but executing a game is incredibly difficult. And we've seen competent teams or somewhat competent teams, really struggle with that.
Yeah.
So I think this is one to kind of wait and see a little bit for me, but a crazy comeback story, and definitely a great outcome for those who've held through this whole time. So I'm happy for them.
And I thought on the Luka Nets himself, I think he's just an investor. He doesn't have like a massive following or anything, but I think he's an investor more on that side. So people are believing it might be more run like a company. I think that's sort of the take right now. So that'll be one to look out for. We didn't really get into the Omni chain stuff, but I see that the ghostly ghosts are on there. That had a little bit of a run. I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's catching too hard. That sort of the Omni chain meta, but that could be one to watch out for. I think if the art was better on it, it would have helped. But
Same.
we've seen a couple other projects that just immediately dusted. So it doesn't seem like people are attaching themselves to the Omnichain idea. Most of those are still getting minted on the ETH side. I think it was around 60% or so. And then there was like a Tiny Dinos one that I saw yesterday, which was like 80% minted on ETH. So doesn't seem like that's really catching. But something to look out for. That might be another thing that pops up this weekend. And then, so we'll have guys from BitLectro on tomorrow to chat. And they're coming out with a new project attached on their brand. So we'll learn more about them. And then hopefully Monday we'll have happy thoughts from the weekend, if you're right on this blow off top kind of idea. And, maybe this whole page will be green. And then that's kind of best case scenario, right? But
sure is.
So, if you're watching, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next week.